This video will be about Activity 221 in Financial Math. So Activity 221 is this worksheet, and the worksheet starts with just some general information. This summary is especially good to read because it tells you what it means by purchases, transfer payments, and interest payments. So you'll read all that information, and then you're going to do this chart. So this chart is just taking each of these words and putting them in the correct column. So like road building is something the government pays for. So that would be under government purchases. So you're just going to put each word in the correct column. If you're not sure what the word means, like Medicaid, just Google it. So I already put this into Google. Google says Medicaid in the United States is a social health care program for families and individuals with old age and limited resources. So basically the government gives old people money to help take care of their health as they get older. So that would go under government transfer payments. So once you've filled out the column, then there's a little bit more where they give you a chart and they list the spending and the revenue in each year from 1950 to the year 2000. So spending is how much the government spends. Revenue is how much the government earns through our taxes and such. It collects taxes. So in 1950 they made $39 million in taxes, but they spent $43 billion. And I said million, sorry, 39 billion in taxes, but they spent 43 billion. And in the year 1990, if it's 1,032 billion, that's really $1,032,000,000,000. So it's going to ask a couple of questions, like when did it spend more than it collected? You're just going to look at each side of the chart and compare spending to revenue, because remember revenue is how much they collected. Then it asks, use a calculator to find out how many times larger revenue was in 2000 than in 1950. So they're looking at just the revenue column, comparing 2000, the year 2000, to the year 1950. Since I want you to do that on your own, for the example, I'm just going to do the year 1980 and the year 1970. How many times larger was our revenue in 1980 than it was in 1970? So to figure out how many times larger, we're actually going to have to do backwards and do division. If we take our 1980 amount and divide it by our 1970 amount, that will give us how many times larger it is. So 1980 amount was 517.10 billions of dollars. Divided by 1970 was 993. So the spending in 1980 was and this would round. So the 5 would make the 9 round to a 0, and that changes this to a 3. So the revenue was 3 times larger in the years 1980 than 1970. You could do the same thing with spending. 591 divided by 196, 3.01. So spending was 3 times larger in the year 1980 than it was in the year 1970. These ones match pretty well. If you do it for revenue, or for 2000 and 1950 and 2000 and 1950 for spending, you might get different amounts. You'll see once you do it. So once you find that how many times it was greater, you're going to compare which one was greater, revenue or spending. You would just look at each of these and say which one was bigger. And then the last question, how do you think government revenue and spending will change in the future? So looking at that table, decide, well, what's going to happen in the future? Is it going to follow the same pattern? Do you think it will be different? This one is more of your opinion. So as long as you give a good, valid explanation, you'll get that one correct. So that concludes our discussion on Activity 221.